Hello, this is Julian with Coffee Reviews, and today we'll be reviewing the Geisha WX wash processed Ecuador from Coffea Circulor. There's the bag right there. And Coffea Circulor, based out of Gothenburg, Sweden. And this is our fourth Coffea Circulor Gala Morales review in this series. And this coffee was originally supposed to be our final review in this Gala Morales series. However, Coffea Circulor released a Mejorado shortly after we had placed an order for all of these coffees. So I recently placed another order for that one, and we should be reviewing it sometime in the future. But the main reason that this coffee was originally supposed to be our final review from this series is because this is the one that's most in line with my own preferences, and is the one I expected to like the most. So it'll definitely be interesting to see how this one turned out. This right here is day 42. And recipe we went with for this coffee was Coffea Circulor's recipe, which is a 15:1 water to coffee ratio, brewed at 93 degrees Celsius, about 199 degrees Fahrenheit. And I actually like this one best through the Chemex, which indicates a more medium grind. Roast profile for this coffee has been in line with our previous experiences with this coffee roaster, which is on the very light side of things, as Coffea Circulor is one of the lighter roasting coffee roasters, even in Scandinavia. So with all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and start discussing this coffee. Day 16, first impression, and we opted for the V60, and there was a fair bit within the cup itself as it offered some really nice clarity, and that clarity did seem to help the cup skew in a more citric direction, as it was in line with a lot of the classic bergamot-like experiences we've had from Coffea Circulor's coffees in the past. In addition to that, it was wildly pronounced with plenty of the listed honey as well. And on the cool down, there was an ever so slight stone fruit aspect to it, so plenty of fresh fruits, and as a result, it was a pretty nice start. Day 19, ran it through the Chemex, and it offered an abundance of the citric fruit aspects yet again, as the listed bergamot is highly present and pronounced once more. There is a fair bit of sweetness, though it's not particularly defined in any specific direction, as I would say it's a little bit more of a generic sweetness as opposed to something in a specific profile. Opens up a fair bit more on the cool down with a little bit more of some herbality as well as some honey. So some depth to this one, but we continue on to day 21 as we opted for the April brewer, and the cup continues to skew in the bergamot-like direction with plenty of the noted citric attributes at the forefront. High levels of floral honey as well, as there's an ever so slight fermentiness to the fruit itself. That's one of the main reasons why this brew method wasn't necessarily my favorite, as that did seem to mess with the clarity ever so slightly. Nonetheless, still a pretty solid cup. We continue on to day 24, as we opted for the V60 with Coffea Circulor's recipe, and this is a fair bit better, as it's the most balanced the cup has been up to this point. A bit more definition to the citrus, as the listed clementine at this time felt a bit more apt than it had in the past. In addition to that, there was a nice herbal florality to the cup, and there's an ever so slight grainy citric quality, as well as a more delicate floral honey. So the result, a pretty nice day on this one. We continue on to day 27, as we opted for the Chemex with Coffea Circulor's recipe, and this is the best the cup had been by a distance to this point, as it was offering an extremely Coffea Circulor-like cup with an abundance of the citric aspects, most prominently in the bergamot-like spice quality direction, with excellent clarity, and this really seemed to ramp up the clarity a notch, resulting in the cleanest cup we'd experienced up to this point. In addition to that, there was an ever so slight bit more sweetness with plenty of the honey florality. Once again, excellent day as a result. We continue on to day 30 as we tried one more time with the V60 and Coffea Circulor's recipe, and it's still a very nice day. So the coffee, as you'd expect, is improving quite a bit within this time frame, as the defined citric acid attributes to the cup is a little bit more sweet at this time, with a great complementary floral component to it as well. Classic Geisha scents with Coffea Circulor citrus, so you can probably imagine a lot of that if you've had similar coffees in the past, a fair bit of that spiced bergamot-like attribute. Day 33, one more try through the Chemex with Coffea Circulor's recipe just to verify that this one was my preferred brew method, and it definitely hit on that, as it offered once again a classic Coffea Circulor citrus as well as honey yet again. Fruit sweetness is almost reminiscent of gummies at this time, and that's why I really enjoyed this day near as much as I'd enjoyed it on that day 27 mark. Day 36, final notes, we have another try through the Chemex with Coffea Circulor's recipe, and I'm feeling the coffee continues to improve ever so slightly, especially on the cool down, that's when you pick up a lot more of these notes from this one. But the entire cup continues to feel like it's on the verge of greatness with a super clean base and a sweeter citric forward profile. All right, let's go ahead and put up the tasting wheel so you can see what we're getting. And we have one level 5, so let's go through that real quick. And it is the cleanliness level 5. Yes, so there were times where I would say that this coffee was slightly cleaner than it had been at other moments. Most specifically, I'm thinking of that day 27 mark with the Chemex versus the earlier mark that we had with the April brewer. From that point going forward, I was experiencing a little bit more clarity in general. Nonetheless, I still think it justifies that level 5, as mostly the definition within this coffee is pretty well pronounced. It's lacking any of the other kind of undesired qualities within this one as you're seeing through the rest of this tasting wheel. Let's take you through the rest of it, and we'll start with the finish at a level 4. So it finishes pretty even, and I think maybe I had a little bit of a concern that since there's so much intensity to it and it's still somehow offering a Geisha-like quality to it, it might get kind of mixed in terms of that finish. It might be a little too overbearing, or maybe in some sense it might be a little too soft. It finishes in a pretty strong citric direction as well, which isn't necessarily something that I'm enjoying too much. It has so much of that bergamot-like quality to it that I'm like, okay, this isn't necessarily ideal for me, but level 4 seems like a good place to put that. Sweetness, level 4. Yeah, this was a pretty sweet coffee, and I feel like I have mixed experiences with Geishas in general in terms of the sweetness, but this one right here, I would say true level 4. It's not anything above that, even when I'm experiencing a little bit more of the sweeter qualities to it. That just seems to be the best place to kind of line that up, and when I'm lining that up, it's a little bit more of a sweeter citric direction, or at least in terms of a honey direction, as we're looking at that florality being there at that level 4. Once again, that is that honeyed florality that was pretty notable very early on within this one, and something that was ever present throughout. And I think that it probably was the second most defining factor of this coffee, which is fine. I'm not the biggest fan of floral honey, so it is what it is, I suppose. Citrus fruit, level 4. Yes, even with as much as I've kind of harped on the bergamot-like attribute being overly present and strong within this one, I wouldn't necessarily say that it's been overbearing to the point where it did reach that level 5 mark. It's very citric forward, but at times it's a very nice citric forward cup. At other times I would say that it's skewing a little bit too much in that spice direction that I don't necessarily enjoy too much. Then we have a couple of level 3s. We'll start with the acidity level 3. Not necessarily the brightest coffee. I don't know if I was expecting it to be an overly bright coffee going into it. What's funny to me is that we have had some other coffees from them that have been a little bit brighter than this one, but even then, not the biggest, most important factor to me. Spice, level 3, absolutely. That's that spiced bergamot-like quality that's also present within the savoriness that I will briefly mention that also scored that level 3 and ever present within a lot of Coffea Circular's coffees, especially their super clean ones like this. Stone fruit, level 3. That might be my biggest gripe and grievance within the entirety of this tasting wheel, as I was really hoping to get a fair bit more in terms of the stone fruit quality out of it. If I remember correctly, I believe that they do have a yellow plum note listed on here, and I would not necessarily say that the peachy quality that I typically experience with their listed plum notes on their coffees was very present within this one at any specific time. So I felt like the best I could justify this one was being there at that level 3 mark. And then final thing worth discussing is the body at a level 1. This is a very light bodied cup of coffee, which I think has a little bit to do with the fact that we opted for the Chemex on this one. Outside of that, as I'm looking at this tasting wheel, I do think it's a pretty good representation of what I was getting from this coffee. All right, so my overall thoughts and impressions of this coffee. I said it in the final day's notes that we had. This one continued to feel like it was verging on greatness. And here's a little bit of my grievance with this one. I know I'm holding Coffea Circulor to a much higher standard than a lot of other coffee roasters, and I know I'm holding this coffee to a much higher standard than I would almost any other coffee that's in a pretty similar field to this one. But what happened with this one was that it offered such a wonderfully clean base. So the base does justify that level 5 mark, and you can feel it at times with this one being ever so clean. And you're just waiting on something special to come from it, because if you have that super clean base, you're like, okay, what are you going to bring me with this? Are you going to bring me some really wonderful fruit qualities to it? Are you going to bring me some really wonderful florals? And for this one, it offered two things with that clarity that I don't necessarily enjoy. I have never been the biggest fan of Coffea Circular's like spiced quality that they have in their coffees. So that was one of the things. And then the other things was this floral honey, which once again, I feel like at times has been a little bit overkill for me in the last couple of years. So those two things being the most pronounced characteristics, while that desired stone fruit quality not being as abundant present, prominent, or clear as I'd wanted, was also hindering this one ever so slightly. In addition to that, I was hoping for maybe a little bit more of a floral component in a slightly different direction than what it actually offered. So those things are me being very nitpicky about this coffee. At the end of the day, of these Gala Morales coffees, it was definitely my favorite of the 4 we've reviewed up to this point. And in addition to that, I mean, it's still a wonderful coffee. It's one of the coffees I've enjoyed the most this year up to this point, but I do have to be a somewhat harsh critic on this one because of the extraordinarily high expectations I had for it going into it. The type of person I would suggest this coffee to, this one right here is classic Coffea Circulor. So if you have liked that spiced and bergamot-like quality that's been present in so many other coffees in the past, this one offers it with a very clean base to it. In addition to that, it gives you some very well-defined honey attributes from start to finish as well. There's a fair bit of depth to this one, and as I mentioned, there's an ever so slightly herbal quality to it, which I think goes a little bit more in line with the other florals that are present within this coffee, as well as a stone fruit quality that, while not necessarily the most pronounced, it is subtle and secondary in the background, while still offering some very nice sweetness all around. So there are plenty of positives to be taken away from this one, but I feel like that's the best way I can leave this review. If you by chance had an opportunity to try this coffee, I'd love to know your thoughts and impressions of it as well. If you're enjoying the content, give this video a like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed. This right here has been a review of the Geisha WX, wash processed Ecuador from Coffea Circulor. Thank you for watching.